Human history is usually written on the surface of the earth, in the brilliance of coronations, the thunder of battles, and the light of bonfires that chased away the night in medieval cities. But true, primal horror has always sought places where that light could never penetrate. In 2026, during routine geological surveys in the foothills of the Harz Mountains in southern Germany, a work crew stumbled upon an anomaly. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a massive void where ancient maps indicated nothing but solid granite. When heavy machinery finally broke through the upper crust of rock, researchers discovered the entrance to an abandoned silver mine. It had been sealed for over 600 years, since the middle of the 14th century. This was the era when she ruled Europe. The Black Death, a plague that emptied entire towns, leaving behind nothing but boarded-up houses and thousands of unblessed corpses. The archaeologists who first descended into the fissure expected to see standard historical shafts, leftover debris, or the crude tools of medieval miners. But as the beams of modern LED flashings sliced through the centuries-old darkness, the first thing that caught their eyes was the entrance gate. It hadn't just collapsed with age. It had been barricaded. From the inside, someone had spent their final, dying breaths hauling massive boulders into the tunnel, fusing them together with a crude mixture of lime and clay. The people who did this weren't trying to protect the mine from thieves. They were hiding. They had turned a workplace into an underground fortress, a fortress that would eventually become their collective mass grave. As the initial research team stepped through the breached barricade, their oxygen and toxic gas sensors began to beep warningly. The air here had been trapped, motionless, for hundreds of years. It was dry, cold, smelling heavily of ancient sulfur and decay. Moving deeper into the tunnel, the archaeologists began to find the first signs of life. Clay shards from grease lamps, the residue of burnt animal fat, fragments of coarse wool. The people had come here in a desperate panic, grabbing whatever they could carry. Sacks of grain, salted meat, barrels of water. This was no ordinary mining shift. An entire community had fled underground. Men, women, children. About 40 people in total. But the real shock awaited the team in the deepest section of the mine, where the ceiling dipped so low they had to crawl. On the soft, damp shell walls were thousands of deep, chaotic grooves, fingernail scratches. They covered every inch of stone, from the floor to as high as a man could reach. In some places, a gouges tore so deep into the rock that forensic experts would later recover fragments of human bone and trace organic tissue left behind in the dry stone. These people had literally torn the flesh from their fingers, trying to crawl through the solid earth. Why? The immediate thought is the madness of hunger and asphyxiation. When the last lamps flicker out and the water runs dry, insanity takes over quickly. In absolute darkness, a human loses all spatial orientation within 30 hours. You begin to hear sounds in the dead silence, and your mind projects monsters into the void. However, when the spotlights illuminated a section of the wall near the remains of an old campfire, the simple theory of starvation-induced madness crumbled. Scrawled onto the rock face with a piece of charred wood was an inscription in medieval Latin. The letters were jagged, the writer's hand trembling from either absolute terror or the advanced stages of disease. But the words were hauntingly clear. It did not come from the streets. It rose from below. To comprehend what happened inside this mine in the year 1348, one must remember what the plague meant to a medieval mind. It wasn't just a pathogen, not merely the Yersinia pestis bacteria carried by fleas and rats. It was the wrath of God. The apocalypse made manifest in rotting blood and black, buboes upon the bodies of sinners. When the Black Death reached the miners' village, the people decided that the only safe place left was deep within the earth. They believed the subterranean depths would shield them from the miasma, the poisoned air that contemporary medical theories blamed for the dying cities. They descended 40 meters down, sealed the world away behind boulders, and prayed to Saint Barbara, the patron saint of miners, to protect them. They thought they had left death behind on the surface, in the world of the living where fires burned and the living wept for the dead. They were wrong. Forensic analysis of the skeletal remains found deep in the shafts raised more questions than answers. The bones showed none of the typical long-term structural damage associated with chronic plague, yet almost every skull possessed a broken jaw and shattered teeth. It was as if these people had screamed with such violent force that their joints failed under the tension, or as if they were desperately trying to swallow something or spit it out. DNA testing confirmed that the plague bacteria was indeed present in the mine, but its behavior was anomalous. Instead of killing its host slowly over a week, death here seemed to strike the entire community almost simultaneously. Within a matter of hours, the inscription on the wall, it rose from below, suggests that as the miners dug deeper in search of a silver vein, they breached the geological barrier that had isolated something else entirely, something that had slumbered in deep tectonic rifts for millions of years. It could have been a pocket of ancient toxic gas that triggered immediate violent mass hallucinations, forcing them to see their worst nightmares in the dark and tear at the stone with their bare hands. But there is another, far more terrifying hypothesis. Medieval chronicles speak of the pneumonic and septicemic strains of the plague mutations that traveled through the air and killed within hours. What if the birthplace of this horror wasn't the filthy medieval streets? What if the original primordial strain of the Black Death had been waiting for eons in the hollow spaces of the earth? And it was these very miners who, by breaking the seal, unleashed the curse upon the rest of Western civilization. Once the archaeological teams concluded their research and extracted the final remains, the decision was made to permanently seal the mine once more. Modern engineering allowed it to be locked away behind thick, airtight concrete barriers. Yet, the scientists who spent weeks beneath the earth admitted in hushed, private conversations, it wasn't the sight of the mangled skeletons or the claw marks on the walls that haunted them the most. It was the sound. When the diesel generators on the surface were cut, and the tunnels fell into absolute, primordial silence, a faint, rhythmic tapping could be heard echoing from the deepest, unexplored levels below. From the very darkness where death had once emerged, it sounded like someone, very slowly, stone by stone, was continuing to climb upward. Darkness has a memory, and sometimes all it asks is to never be disturbed. Are you certain the ground beneath your house is secure? That beneath your bed, through layers of concrete and asphalt, hundreds of meters down, nothing is waking up from a centuries-old slumber right now? Leave a comment if you would dare to spend a single night in that mine. And remember, when you look into the abyss, it already knows your name.